screen.
All right. Good evening and welcome to our event tonight. I'm Shani from Uncle Bobbie's Coffee and Books, located in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. We have a great event for you all tonight, and I would like to first thank everyone for being with us. We have the lovely Christine Platt, and she will be discussing her book, The Afro-Minimalist Guide to Living with Less. She'll be in conversation with Chanae Richards, and a live Q&A will follow. If at any time you do have a question, make sure that you use the Ask a Question module located on your screen. Chanae will field those questions from there toward the end of the discussion. You can also order your copy of Christine's new book by clicking the button below, which will take you directly to the Uncle Bobbie's Bookshop webpage, where you can get your books delivered directly to you. If you're ever also in the Germantown area, make sure that you stop by Uncle Bobbie to pick up your copy in store. And now, for the moment we've all been waiting for. Christine Platt is a modern day Renaissance woman.
Hey.
From serving as an advocate for policy reform to using the power of storytelling as a tool for social change, Christine's work reflects in her practice of living with intention. She holds a BA in Africana Studies, an MA in African American Studies, and a JD in General Law. Christine has written over 24 literary works for people of all ages, and when she's not writing, she spends her time curating the Afro-Minimalist, a creative platform chronicling her journey to minimalism. You can visit her at theafrominimalist.com. Chanae Richards is the CEO and principal designer of Oloro Interiors, an interior design firm with offices in Philadelphia and New York. Her curated spaces and design expertise have been featured in Elle Decor, Business of Home, Philadelphia Magazine, and The Apartment Therapy. Along with being an inaugural Philadelphia Mural Arts Fellow, Chanae also serves as the managing director of the Philadelphia Housing Authority's Entrepreneur Resource Center, a groundbreaking initiative providing residents with free business resources and support for community innovation. She received her BA from Temple University and an MA and MPA from Rutgers University. And with that, I'd like to introduce these two wonderful women to you all. Thank you for being here with us today, ladies. And I'm going to take myself away so we can get this conversation on the road.
All right, let's do it. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction.
You're welcome. You are welcome.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And we are so excited to be here this evening. And as you can see, we're trying something new.
That's right.
We're in the same room, so you don't have to look at all the different squares. And we're just going to get right into tonight's conversation about my new book, The Afro-Minimalist Guide to Living with Less. Thank you all for the love and support that you have shown me thus far. And I'm excited to be in conversation with Chanae and then to answer some of your Q&As this evening. So let's go.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Y'all, thank you for joining us. Like Christine said, we're really excited to chat with you. And I am personally excited to talk with my friend about her new book, this amazing, amazing book. If you haven't gotten it yet, be sure to get it. The Afro-Minimalist Guide to Living with Less. I mean, it's filled with so much love. And like I said, I'm thrilled to be here talking with my honey tonight. The first question that I have been thinking about is that this book covers a lot of ground. And I'm talking mainstream minimalism in theory and practice and consumption, and the piece on forgiveness is huge, right?
Uh-huh.
So how are you able to get this book conceived and edited and where it is now in less than a year? How are you able to do that?
Ooh, I still don't know. This book actually came about during the pandemic. I was in conversation with my agent just about different projects, and she was like, I think now is a good time to probably pitch that Afro-Minimalist book. Like, more people are going to be at home. And what was so interesting is we didn't even know the pandemic was going to rage on as long as it did. And I think, the timing was just divine. Also, even though I have my girl, my daughter just graduated, for those of you who don't know.
Hey, Nala.
I didn't have all the back and forth commuting. I didn't have a lot of the, I guess, ripping and running that we normally had to do. And so I was just able to utilize my time really well. And then also, the more I started working on it, just the more passionate I became about the project. And so, yeah, somehow it all got written and published in a year. Will not highly recommend this for anyone else, but I do recommend it if you really want to get your work out there, and if it's possible. And so I'm just incredibly grateful. And as this book is, it's written for everyone, but there are specific areas that I feel speak directly to us. And I think that that's what's so exciting, is that now we're all like open and ready to receive this. And so, yeah, this is a blessing.
You talk about this book being for us, and it feels like it legitimately is for us. And so there are these for the culture sections, and I kind of wanted you to talk more about those and why it was important to include that.
Yeah, so what Chanae is talking about or referencing are these Black pages with this mud cloth print on the side. And every time you see one of these Black pages that is labeled for the culture, these are specific considerations for Black people and other marginalized communities. And one of the reasons that I included these is, first of all, lifestyle and wellness spaces, they rarely consider our unique experiences. And I really wanted to speak to that, because I think, especially when it comes to a topic like minimalism, so many people are like first gen, second gen, just being able to I'm the first homeowner, I'm the first this, I'm the first that, right? And there are just so many additional considerations for us to think about. I'm going to read one of my favorite for the culture pages. And if you have your book, I am on page 80. Ownership is an especially complicated matter for people of the African diaspora. From our ancestors being stolen and once owned as property, to our need to have things so that we feel in control of something in our lives, Black people have a different, deeper relationship with our belongings. Additionally, our communities are still grappling with generational implications and inequities resulting from slavery, Jim Crow, redlining, and other state-sanctioned limitations on ownership. Without a doubt, our familial and collective histories continue to influence why we are so attached to our things. Black people and other marginalized groups must understand the powerful connection between the psychology of ownership and the false sense of security it often provides. Our desire to seek comfort in things is heightened when we live in a society where we constantly feel unsafe, at risk. Take special note of areas in your life where your attachments to and unwillingness to let go of certain things may be rooted less in the culture of consumerism and more in the culture of white supremacy. Although making such acknowledgments can be difficult and even painful, this work is necessary, not only for your minimalist practice, but also for your survival and that of our communities. If our resources are used to purchase things for comfort instead of building generational wealth, we run the risk of not only remaining victims of systemic oppression, but even worse, contributing to it.
Wow.
And so, these are considerations for our community, right? And also thinking about, every section has a call out page, because there's always something that we have to consider that is unique to our experience, right? From letting go, you want me to throw away something that's perfectly fine.
Right.
I know I don't need it and use it or love it, but I gotta let it go, right? Like this is a very, it's a very difficult concept for some folks to grasp. And so I really wanted to just provide some context for people. Also weaving in like historical considerations, like these things are really important. So that is why I included those for the culture call outs.
And also, there are these checkpoints, right? I call them checkpoints. And they're areas in the book which really cause you to pause, right? Yeah. I know they cause me to pause and think about your experiences. And these prompts are woven in, and it makes it so that the readers, that we don't feel guilty about this process. Yeah. Can you talk to us about that guilt and those feelings?
Yes. So I included just like checkpoints throughout each chapter and even throughout some of the sections to really get people to sort of do a lot of reflection. So much of minimalism, living with less, decluttering, whatever you want to call it, is, it's a process of self-discovery. It's so much more than your things, right? And so I think in, including these considerations and questions and sort of like checking in with yourself, it really helps you through that process of self-discovery. And also, there should be no guilt, right? And I say that as someone who experienced all those emotions when I was going through it. And that's what kind of led me to develop a more holistic approach to letting go, because no one ever talked about the emotions that were going to come up, right? So here I am pulling all this stuff out my closet, getting ready to declutter and live my best life. And then all of a sudden I'm sobbing, I'm angry at myself, I'm disappointed. And I'm just like, ain't nobody, all the people online never said nothing about these emotions. And a big part of this work is forgiveness, right? Like a big part of this work is forgiveness. And, we tend to tell ourselves certain things like, look at all this money I wasted. Look at this. Listen, man, you're not going to recoup it. You know what I mean? And you can't hold yourself accountable to a standard now, based on what you did back then, right? And so you have to extend yourself some grace, extend forgiveness to yourself and anyone else who you feel may have contributed to, your overconsumption. So I don't want anyone to feel guilty. I don't want anyone to feel shame. I really want this to, be this process of self-discovery that you are excited about, because it really is, putting you on the pathway to live with intention,
And you talk about this process. So I want to talk about that a little bit more. There's this 4-step process, and it really changed the way that I thought about how I approach my excess. Okay. And so talk through about this process. Talk to us about how this makes you feel, because this is more than touching a piece and seeing if it sparks joy. Yeah. Like that don't work for me. So talk through how this process.
Yeah, I mean, the process that I created was a process that I wish I had. This is not what I fully went through, at least intentionally, not what I fully went through. But upon reflection, I realized like I did it at different stages, and like that's what helped me move forward. And so the process that I created is more holistic. Step 1 is acknowledging that you have more than you need, right? And that's so much more than calling your girlfriend and being like, girl, I got so much shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so much more than that. And I start the beginning of the book, as like really guiding people through understanding why you have more than you need and why it's so hard to let go, so that step 1 is a lot easier. And step 2 is forgiveness, which is so big for me. And I have a forgiveness prayer. I'll probably read that to y'all in a little bit. That. Yeah. Step 3, then finally you get to step 3, which is letting go. But then step 4 is paying it forward with your donations, right? Like being very intentional about where you are sending the things that no longer serve you, because, the usual suspects like Goodwill and Salvation Army, you just delaying a trip to the landfill, right? So like I'm big on like gifting to friends, family, community, right? Buy nothing groups, churches, community organizations. Like there's so many people in our own communities that can benefit from these things that we just want to drop off at a donation center. And so, those are the 4 steps. And for me, forgiveness was the hardest, right? So I'm going to read the forgiveness prayer that I included. And this is on page 119 for anyone who's following along. As I commit to my journey to live with less, I acknowledge that I have more than I need, and I forgive myself for the choices that have led to my excess. I also forgive others who have knowingly or unknowingly contributed to my behaviors and spending habits, and I release any and all negativity that I may be harboring as a result of their influence. I have a right to experience everything that I am feeling, so I allow myself to acknowledge these feelings, but I refuse to let them hold me captive and bound to my past. As I continue to do the work to live with less, whenever I feel negative emotions, I will acknowledge them and then I will release them. And I will repeat this process as many times and as often as necessary, because I am worthy of and capable of forgiveness. And with this extension of grace to myself and others comes the power to move forward in confidence with my decision to become a more mindful, intentional consumer. I commit to doing so, not only for myself, but also for the people and community I love. Now I move forward with the renewed purpose and gratitude for the gift of forgiveness, I'll say. Right? But even I remember writing that, and my editor was actually the one who really pushed me to include a forgiveness prayer. I was like, but I told them to pray. They gon', and she was like, why don't you just give them like some guiding language? And she was like, just do a sample prayer. And I remember writing that and I just sobbed, right? Because so much of what we're carrying in terms of like our behavior, our habits, so much of it is generational. So much of it is cultural. So much of it is community driven. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, yo, like we got to forgive ourselves. We have to forgive the people who loved us and were doing the best that they can, right? Like understanding that so much of this is generational. What I learned from my mother was what she learned from her mother and her grandmother, right? And other women in the community that raised her, right? So it's just, again, it's so much more than your things. It's really just doing this deeper inquiry to understand, like, why do I buy this when? Why do I always do this when? You know what I'm saying? Like, I had to really figure that. Yeah. For me, it was, bargain shopping.
Yeah. That red tag.
Oh, that red tag. That red tag be calling my name.
Right. And still, though, it's a process. And it's still causing it.
It is. And I talk about that in here too, like getting people to understand, like, just because you read this book and go do all this work, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be tempted and triggered, right? Because it's so ingrained in who we are. But once you know what your temptations and triggers are, then.
And those temptations can be real.
They can be so real. Look, man, when I go into some of these stores, I'll be finding like, you go to like a little market and there'll be a little grandma out there with her scented shea butter. I'll be like, ooh, Christine, you don't need no more shea butter, So it's just like this self-talk that I now do with myself. And I talk about the importance of pausing because that pausing keeps me from getting more shea butter or more things that I don't need because those things accumulate. Also, something that you learn in the process is that you know what your things are. Everyone has a thing. Right. So my thing is like toiletries, wellness, and beauty products.
I can see that.
You can see that. Right? And so I have to know, like, I'm not the person that's going to be as tempted or triggered by a new dress, even if it's on sale, because I've like worked through that process. But like health and beauty products, books, plants, you know what I'm saying? I'll be having to have some conversations with myself. But I think that's the power of really learning, like, who is my most authentic self? Who am I? Right? Like, what drives me, what brings me joy, and understanding that if I love something that much, that I have to make space for it. And that's usually what stops me. I'm like, you ain't got no more space.
You don't have the room. We don't have the room.
Yeah.
So we talk about in decorating authenticity and intention and we're in your space right now. So do you feel like you nailed it?
Oh my gosh, I love my space
I know
so
you
much,
do.
and you've
I
seen a
know you
couple
do.
iterations of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing I want people to understand, because a lot of people, look at the posts and stuff that I do on Instagram, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I love your space," and I'm like, "This is 5 years in the making, right?" And there's no reason to rush. Like, this idea that you can accumulate stuff for 20, 30 years and then somehow whittle down through it all in a weekend is just unrealistic, right? And so again, it goes back to extending yourself some grace and just like really taking your time with this process, I think, is so important. Like, when you work with design clients, what is like their biggest, like, what are some of the things that you hear the most when it comes to like design? Because I think so many people try to mirror certain aesthetics, right?
Yeah.
And that may not be their most authentic self, right?
So we think about authenticity all the time in design and intention. And so when someone has a lot, you never want to walk into someone's house and eye a piece and say something about it negative, because you don't know what kind of connection they have to that piece. You don't know why someone has what they has, and you do talk about that a lot in the book. But the reason why we gather, the things that we do, family heirlooms, things that a friend had given us, we talk about that. But it's the same in design. We talk about the pieces that you want to keep, that you want to include in your home, because that's a part of it. These are the pieces that you grew up with, or something that you love, and you want to keep that. So we try to always incorporate those kind of pieces in the work that I do.
Yeah, I speak to folks about that a lot, and I think this is again where cultural considerations have to come into play. I have a couple friends who are decluttering professionals. By the way, if it's too much, there is no shame.
Hire a pro.
Hire a professional to come in and help you whittle down through all that stuff.
Always hire a pro.
Yeah. And one of the things that has been just so beautiful for me is to hear from white decluttering specialists that say, "I'm so glad I read your book. You should see how it's flagged and dog-eared, because these are considerations that I would have never given to BIPOC people who are served." And one of the examples that I often give them is about Bibles.
Oh, yeah.
So here's an example of just like a cultural consideration that mainstream minimalism and media would miss. And that is, you go into someone's home and they have two Bibles, traditional minimalist practitioners would say, you only need one Bible. Why you got two Bibles, right? And for us, it's like, well, this is my grandmother's Bible or my great-great-grandmother's Bible. And, there are passages in here that are highlighted, right? It still smells like her. When I hold it, it feels like her, right? It reminds me of her. And so this is a piece that is very grounding and special and important to me, right? And so I have to keep this. And this is my Bible that I take to church, right? And like, this is my Bible. And this is the Bible that my daughter or granddaughter is going to feel about this Bible, right? And so like this understanding that it's more than just two Bibles. You know what I mean? So like, I want you to really think about as you like go through your belongings and touch certain things. Now, another example. I had 2 copies of Cane River. I love the book, but at some point, I either thought I lost a copy or I must have found another copy on sale and purchased it. I don't need 2 copies of Cane River, right? So that's something that those are 2 books that I can just let go. But that's very different than a cultural consideration or memento, such as, a family heirloom. So, yeah. How are we doing on time? Are we having any questions, you guys? If you have any questions,
in the chat for questions,
drop them in the chat. I think it's a little question bubble down there. There we go. So we don't have any questions in the chat. So go ahead and drop some questions in the chat. You can see if there are any in comments there. I really want people to...
Candace used to have 5 Bibles.
What? This is what I'm saying. This is like, there are things culturally that are just unique to our experience. I think while we're waiting for people to ask questions, I'll talk about part 1 of the book, because I hear people saying like, oh my gosh, I love part 1 so much. And that's because it is not like a traditional book on decluttering. we start with the psychology of ownership, right? And understanding why you have so much more than you need and why it's so hard to let go. And I think what was so powerful about this writing this section for me was that so much of this came from marketing materials and then come from psychology journals. It was like,
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, like these businesses are very much aware of the psychology of ownership, and I'm like, oh, we're not on equal playing fields here, right? And so I think it's really important to understand why you're motivated to buy certain things, how you form attachments to things, right? I was very shocked to understand the power of touch, but once I read about that, it made perfect sense. So this is why folks, they're like, test drive the car, try on the clothes, walk around the store in the shoes, right? Because they know the minute you touch something is when you form partial ownership, and then you want to exert full ownership, right? And one example that we can see that in very well is with children.
My toy.
Girl, it's theirs. It is theirs. All they did was just touch it and pick it up in the store. You can give them a roll of toilet paper in the store, just like give them something to do and play with in the cart. And then you get to the register and you're like, okay, give me the toilet. They're like, no, it's mine.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but it's the same with adults. The only difference is we have a few coins, and so we can go ahead and buy the thing, right? Also, that feeling of wanting to exert full ownership, to go from partial ownership to full ownership, you feel a lot of, oh my God, I have to get this. If I put this back, somebody else is going to get it.
The fear of missing out.
The fear of missing out, right? On something you ain't even need a few minutes ago, but you just touched it. So everyone, just so you know, when you go in Target,
don't go in the Target.
The Targets, when you go in the Targets, and you go to touching everything, this is how your cart ends up full. Because everyone is always at the register like, I didn't even come in here for
Target tells you what you need, and I don't like that.
Listen, no, it don't. If you don't touch nothing, I can go in there. If I don't touch anything, I am good. Sis, that touch, man. So there you have it. Don't be touching everything in the stores, right? Also understanding, again, when we think about like why we have more than we need, let's forget why it's so hard to let go, why we have more than we need, understanding that there are so many things that contribute to that. And as you know, I start with childhood, right? And our childhood plays such a huge role in the spending habits and behaviors that we have, right? Whether it is if you grew up with scarcity, right? Even if you grew up with abundance, I have met people who said like it was overwhelming, all the things that they had as children, right? They don't want a lot of stuff. If you grew up with scarcity, you may feel like I need to have more stuff, right? And by the way, this goes beyond your wardrobe, right? Like, I mean, there are people, maybe their overconsumption is in the pantry. And that's because...
You talking about me?
No, I'm not. I mean, not knowingly. But, if you grew up with food scarcity or which is why when you think about things generationally, I understand why my mama don't throw out nothing, y'all. Nothing. Because she was born shortly after the Great Depression. So it's, again, she learned from her family, right? And so she don't even drink caffeinated coffee. Let her see me trying to throw a little bit of caffeinated coffee down. Don't waste that. Give it to me. Yep. You don't even drink.
She doesn't even want it, right?
But just the idea of waste, right? So thinking back to our childhoods, a lot of us try and fulfill unfulfilled childhood wants, right? And we do that with ourselves and also through our children. I did that with my daughter. Anyone who is out there who knows me well, from the pre-minimalist days, I had a lot of that American Girl doll lived a good life. I mean, Nala had a doll that had everything. I mean, it had its own house, it had its own bed, it had its own bed. It had its own bed, it had a dresser, it had a violin because
Nala had a violin.
Yes, because not so. But what I was doing was fulfilling my own fulfilled childhood wants. Yes, it was for her, but inside it was the dollhouse of my dreams. Right? And so we end up, like just fulfilling these unfulfilled childhood wants in so many different ways. I include a story in here for my ex-husband, who is a huge sneakerhead. And he has, well, at the time of the book, I think he had over 60 pairs of sneakers. He has more than that now. And I remember asking him for the book, I'm like, what's the childhood story behind your sneakers? Yeah. And y'all, it is so funny. I'm sorry.
Oh, I read that.
It's not funny, but it really is, because so many of us will be able to see ourselves. So we have some questions in the chat, but let me just read Joe's story.
Hey, Joe.
Bless Joe's heart, Okay, so this is on page 48. Joe's story. I have a huge sneaker collection. When asked to reflect on a moment in childhood that may have influenced me becoming a sneakerhead, I immediately recall the incident. New Jordans had been released, and like most children, I asked my parents to purchase a pair for me. At the time, sneakers that were almost $100 were unrealistic for many Black children, and my family was no exception. Instead of buying me the real Jordans, they purchased a pair of knockoffs. And not just any knockoffs. Obvious knockoffs, because in addition to the classic silhouette of Michael Jordan in midair about to dunk the basketball, there was a silhouette of another player blocking him. To make matters worse, I had to wear those ugly ass knockoffs because my parents purchased them with their hard-earned money. Man, I got clowned at school. The jokes were never ending, and I was so mad and resentful. The first real Nikes I got were in 9th grade. They were then mandated team basketball shoes, and I got yelled at by the coaches for wearing them daily off the court. Now that I'm older, financially independent, and successful, I buy whatever pair of sneakers I want. And you know what? I still think about those new Jordans. By the way, after this exercise, I counted how many sneakers I own. There are 56 pairs, and out of those, 29 pairs are Jordans. Isn't that wild?
It is.
Like, that's how deeply ingrained these childhood memories are in us. But anyway, let's get to some of the questions. What do we have here?
We have a question from Kristen. It says that she's gone down the minimalist path before and decluttered everything, but then after a few months reverted back. How can someone sustain the minimalist lifestyle?
Yeah, so I hear this a lot, and this is, again, why I started the book the way that I did. Anyone who has decluttered and keeps finding themselves in the space where they're like buying more things and filling the space back up is because you really need to go through the process of self-discovery and understand, number one, again, why you have so much more than you need, right? And in this book, we talk about childhood, as we just mentioned, but also mindless consumption, right? There's conspicuous consumption, which is buying things to show and impress others, which is very big in our community, right? And there's, cultural and societal expectations, right? So I get that a lot too. And I mean, I experienced that myself, my family's from the Caribbean, and there were just things that were expected of me because of, I'm the daughter, or where I fell in line, birth order, right? Like there's all these things that contribute. And so, Kristen, unless you understand why you keep accumulating things, like do that self-inquiry and deeper work to understand like what your triggers are, why you're motivated to buy certain things, why you go shopping, is it emotional spending? Like you have to go through and do that work. And then you have to understand the psychology of ownership piece, which is understanding how and why you form attachments to certain things. So I would say like the piece that is missing for you is doing that deeper inquiry of understanding your authentic self when it comes to your spending habits and behaviors.
Yeah, that's really good. I have a great question here on living with family members. How can you navigate living a minimalist lifestyle without imposing your own practices on other members of your family?
So it's so funny. The other night, Pia and I were in conversation, and Pia, by the way, she's featured in the book, but she's also one of the only Black KonMari consultants that I know. Yeah, so she was able to give us some real tips. And this question came up, and I'm going to try and reframe her answer because my answer was completely unprofessional, which was focus on yourself, right? And like, if they over there doing that, they have to do that. But you know, this idea, what she said was that even with the KonMari method, and this is a professional declutterer, when she goes into couples' homes, every piece is considered by the couple. And if one person wants it, right, they can explain and give their rationale and reason why. If one person doesn't want it, they can explain and give their rationale and reason why. And if one of the partners wants to keep it, it stays. Right. And so I think, you know, one of the things that you have to do when you have family members, you know, it's just par for the course, right? Somebody is going to be neat and somebody is not. You know, you have to really focus on your own individual journey and hopefully lead by example in those spaces. And it may be better to have someone come in, have a professional come in and provide guidance or assistance. If that's something that you can afford, maybe reaching out to a decluttering specialist and ask them for resources that you can use, because I imagine it can get really complicated. I mean, my teen is not the neatest, right? But like, I know you be defending her so much.
I do, because Nala's my girl.
I know, but Nala is a mess. And you know, I kind of let her have control and domain over her mess, right? Like, it's her mess. There's no excess though, right? So I'm like, listen, get the bag, you know, find what you want to donate. So like everything in there that is what she loves, but it's not my place to be like, no, color code your books. You know what I mean? Like, she likes to have her books by author, right? So that would be my advice. And again, like, really, really focus on your own individual journey. And more importantly, ask your partner, family members, friends to respect your journey and your process. I say no a lot, as you know, right? Like, I am very intentional about what I welcome into my life. And it doesn't matter if it is being offered to me by someone that I love. And what has happened is that over time, my friends know, let's just get Christine either nothing
or something that disappears,
a gift that disappears, right? So that would be my advice for that.
Here's a great question on shopping and spending. Visa said this is a big part of how her mother prefers to spend quality time with her. We talked about that in the book. You talked about that in the book. Due to how she was used to bonding with her own mother, right? So it's similar.
That's what I said.
And I worry when I decline these offers, she experiences it as rejection of her bid for connectedness. Any advice?
Oh, that is so hard. So let me just say this. In the book, I share a similar experience with my own mother. And it was really important for me to look through it through my childlike eyes at first, so then I could sort of assess it as an adult. But we did a lot of shopping and spending time together on the weekends. That was like our thing, right? And even into adulthood, that was our thing. And when I adopted this lifestyle, it was really important for me to, like, yes, we can still go out, but like, why don't we go to this outdoor mall, right? So we're like walking around outdoors, or if we go into a store, you know, like, oh no, I'm not purchasing anything. You know, I'm trying to be a minimalist mommy. I ain't purchasing nothing, but we can go in here, right? I do think that there are ways that you can still spend time with your loved ones, whether it's your mother or a sibling or a friend. And that is something that you all, you know, do as a form of leisure. It's not something that I recommend as a form of leisure, but I understand a lot of people are set in their ways. Again, you just have to be very steadfast and your commitment, right? So we can go to the mall.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't buying nothing, right? And don't ask my opinion because I'm gonna be like, you don't need that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need that. You don't need that, right? And so, and also I would have a conversation with your mommy about why you're declining, right? And saying, I don't want you to think that I'm rejecting you or that I don't want to spend time with you, but I'm really trying to be intentional about how I spend my resources, and I'm decluttering my home, and I really just don't want to be tempted when I go to the mall. Like, what is something else do you think that we can do, right? Like, I mean, if it's just walking in cool air, there are other things that we can do. You want to go to a museum, right? Like, so much of this is communication. And I understand how hard it is. I mean, I realized that a lot of stuff that I had in my house was because I just couldn't tell people that I love no. Mm-hmm. And so I had to really learn to exercise that muscle, right? And I mean, that is and not even for myself, even for my daughter, right? Because you get all these, oh my God, it's Nala's birthday. Mm-hmm. Nala don't need nothing. Yeah. Here, we got a college account. You want to drop something in there, right? Like, it's just being honest. Yeah. And that honesty is rooted in the authenticity.
That's great. We have a question from Chanae from Uncle Bobbie's, and she's talking about the image on the front cover.
Yes.
And it says that it is a bloom of cotton, which is correct. Mm-hmm. And being that Afro-minimalism is influenced by the African diaspora, why did you choose this cotton specifically?
Yes, this image is so important to me, y'all. It is by a young Black woman artist named Octavia Thorns. Well, she recently got married. But I really, and she did all the illustrations in the book, by the way, and she does wood carvings. So these are actually wood carvings that are stamped, which is just a beautiful process. But for me, just as I'm reimagining and reclaiming this lifestyle, by the way, which is one that is very familiar and unique to us, at least ancestrally. During my trip to West Africa, I got a chance to see that, simplicity, elegant simplicity, is a part of who we are. It's here being in a capitalist society that we have been fueled by this consumption because it's how we live. And so I wanted to really focus on reclaiming those aspects of ourselves that I feel are so important and intrinsic to who we are. And I feel that way about cotton, right? Because I think for so long, cotton and picking cotton was seen as a symbol of shame, as a symbol of, the butt of jokes, right? And if you've ever touched a cotton blossom, or if you've ever tried to pick cotton from a blossom, you understand that there are little pricks on there, and prick your fingers, and your fingers bleed. I mean, it's a very labor intensive and painful process. And I love reclaiming this image for us because I see it as a strength, as a sign of our strength and resiliency, right, for our ancestors. And so it's just a very important piece for me. And I actually have a jar of raw cotton that I actually keep in my home. It's from a Black cotton farmer, Julius Tillery, who lives in North Carolina. You can look him up, Black cotton. He is also very, very much into this idea of reclaiming who we are. Cotton is our culture, as I believe is his tagline. And I've been to his farm, and so I have raw cotton that I keep in a jar, and it just reminds me to thank and honor my ancestors for their resiliency, for the difficult work they had to do, for the difficult decisions that they had to make that allow me to be here today.
Yeah, there's another piece out here as well. There's pieces everywhere.
The beautiful and talented and amazing Mahogany Brown from my book launch gifted me that cotton flower arrangement over there, which is really, really beautiful. So thank you for that again, Mo.
All right.
Oh, more questions coming in. Okay, what we got?
That was it.
Oh, that was it? Okay.
That was the last question.
So yeah, I really hope that you all, find this book, not only to be informative, but also use it as a resource, because I do think it's so important as we think about our role as consumers, right? And by the way, Black folks, largest class of consumers. I have some statistics in here that have hurt some folks' feelings. So let me see if I can.
And while you're finding it,
Finding those statistics.
Get this book. It's in its second printing, so
Which is wild.
It's wild, but it's that
it.
good. So if you don't have it yet, Uncle Bobbie's will get it to you. Your local bookstore will get it to you. Support your local bookstores. Get it if you don't have it.
Yes. So for those of you who are following along in your book, I am reading from page 58. It's for the culture page here. And it talks about conspicuous consumption, which again, love us. What's this? We love to look good and smell good. We some look good, smelling good people, right? And so we do tend to, find ourselves in the midst of accumulating things because of conspicuous consumption. So I'm going to read this to you all. Conspicuous consumption is an especially important consideration for Black Americans and other marginalized communities. From designer clothing to expensive sneakers and luxury cars, displaying wealth or perceived wealth is very much a part of our culture. A recent Morning Consult survey found that 50% of Black consumers said they trust celebrities and athletes to give them good advice on brands, while 44% said the same of influencers. Let's face it, many people in the Black community allow others to dictate what we buy. We feel a sense of belonging and self-worth because we have the same things as people we admire. First-generation college graduates and six-figure income earners can easily find themselves caught up in the dangerous web of conspicuous consumption. And that was me speaking from experience. In addition to having the means to acquire luxury items that align with societal success, they also tend to feel a sense of responsibility and obligation to do so. But how much more liberating to shift our perspective? How much more empowering and beneficial to instead view first-gen status as an opportunity to build generational wealth. As someone once tethered to the burden of trying to look the part, I now believe I have a responsibility to be intentional and forward-thinking with my resources. I also believe this is a small part of a larger collective responsibility to invest in our communities and build a lasting legacy for future generations, rather than spend on momentary expense trends that quickly lose their value and perceived prestige. For example, did you know 96.1% of the 1.2 million households in the top 1% by income are white? 96.1%. America's 100 richest people control more wealth than the entire Black population. The 5 largest white landowners own more land than all Black people combined. 5. The average Black family would need 228 years to build the wealth of a white family today. We have a choice of how, on what, and where we choose to spend our dollars. And sometimes that choice is as simple as choosing to give in to the temptation of conspicuous consumption, or devoting our resources to more meaningful long-term investments. I mean, it's just the truth, y'all. I mean, I'm not gonna be up here lying to y'all.
Facts are the facts, and they can be shameful. It feels like
are the facts, and we shouldn't be ashamed though. That's the thing. It's like, I'm not ashamed of something that I didn't know beforehand. The page that I was really looking for though was how long a dollar stays in the Black community. Do you remember those statistics? It's something like it stays in the Black community like 6 minutes. And by the time you think of like, I think we go all the way down to like white and Jewish communities and Asian communities, it stays within their community within over 30 days, over a month, right? Like we just out here spending, and we just have to be more mindful and intentional. And I always tell people, like, I mean, I buy stuff, but I'm like, somebody Black. First thing I do is somebody Black can make this, and we make everything, right? Like, we got Black folks making laundry detergent. We got everything out here. So I'll see if I can find those statistics. Did anything else come through there?
Nothing else came through the question.
Okay. Well, if you buy the book, you will come across the statistic. Yeah, I also give some statistics about just like debt. Again, just things that we should really focus on and consider. So I'm gonna do one more dig here. Here it is.
Yeah.
There we go. Last for the culture read for y'all. Okay. Let's keep it 100. You know what's so funny? Let me just say this right quick. I know I keep saying that, but this is funny. So, you know, I had white editors in this book. And I remember them saying, I don't understand what that means.
No.
And they were like, you should change. I said, no, the people I wrote it for, they know
don't
what that means. Okay. Let's keep it 100. The Black community takes pride in looking and smelling good. That's what I just said. We just do, right? It's one of the reasons why we are the most targeted population when it comes to sales and marketing. When it comes to Black consumerism, the level of spending compared to income and earning potential is astounding. Despite being in the lowest income bracket, Black Americans are the highest consumers of virtually every retail sector. And this truth comes at a cost not only to our wallets and the environment, but also to future generations. One of the most startling statistics I came across while researching the Tulsa race riots was how quickly dollars earned are spent outside of our community. Tulsa was once home to the Greenwood District, one of the wealthiest communities of its time before it was destroyed in 1921. In its heyday, Black dollars circulated within Greenwood for almost an entire year before leaving the community. Do you understand? Like, that's how you build community wealth, right? Presently, our dollars leave our community within 6 hours.
Read the rest of that, though.
I am. I'm like 6 hours. That means the minute it hit my bank account, I'm gone. Like, I'm about to go spend it, right? A dollar circulates 6 hours in the Black community, 17 days in the white community, 20 days in the Jewish community, and 30 days in the Asian community. As the most active consumers, we have a responsibility to ourselves, our communities, and our descendants to use our dollars more wisely. Looking to curb your spending and consumption? Consider committing to a no-spend month once a year or quarterly. And whenever you do make purchases, consider taking an extra step to buy from Black makers and creators. In this way, at least your consumption benefits your community. I know that sounds real preachy, but y'all, listen, we got to start talking about this. Yeah. It's time, right? So many of us, we are the first people in our family to have an opportunity to do things differently, right? Whether it's breaking that cycle of, you know, going to the mall on the weekends as a form of leisure, whether it is, you know, making sure that we are being very intentional with our purposes and only purchases and only having those things that we need, use, and love. You know, I've been speaking with a lot of millennials who are very much into small space living, very much into tiny homes and campers and van life, right? Just to gain that financial independence. Like, there are just different ways that we can think about doing things for the betterment of ourselves, our, you know, the people who we will leave things to. We didn't even have enough time to talk about inherited clutter. That's like a whole nother situation. You know, but also, like, again, just thinking about like how we are using and spending our dollars on what, with what, for what, right? Like, we gotta think about it. It's time we really have an opportunity to do something really amazing, again, individually and collectively, when we think about our consumption.
Just checking to make sure we didn't miss any questions.
And I think, we only have like 5 minutes left. I wish I could read all of the comments. But this was us trying to be fancy. And I actually really like the fact that we're both in the room togetger. And this was
very
just
close. This
we
is
used to
very
be real
close.
It's small in here.
It's not that small. It really isn't that small. She makes it seem like it's a tiny place. It's not. It's not.
It's 630 square feet. And again, I think about the house that I lived in before, the house that we almost bought. Whew, it was like 8,000 square feet. It was like egregious. And yeah, like I have never been happier. I have never been more financially secure. I have never been more content and at ease with what I'm able to do. And I talk to people all the time about the benefits of living with less. If the word minimalism, by the way, evokes some sort of negative image or emotion in you, because of how mainstream minimalism portrays it, I always say use a word like, or a phrase like living with less or decluttering. And for me, living with less has afforded me just so many benefits from my time. I don't be wasting time in the morning trying to figure out what I'm going to wear.
Having a uniform,
oh my gosh,
but that helps.
Oh my gosh, having a uniform, and not like like a traditional work uniform. Yeah, but it's like I know that I love dresses and jumpsuits. And so, it also curbs my spending. I don't be buying tops and bottoms like that anymore. So yeah, my time with how I get dressed in the morning, cleaning. I remember spending the whole weekend cleaning, right? So it's another benefit, getting my time back in that way. Not being beholden to accept certain jobs or projects or writing assignments because I need to pay off my credit card or I need to do this or you know what I mean? Like there's so many individual benefits to adopting a lifestyle of less that works your way. By the way, I really want us as a people to consider just the many benefits that this can offer and understand that it does not have to be this sterile environment that we see online. Minimalism can be color and textures and patterns, and right, it's what makes you feel good. It's what's authentic to you. It's what you are intentional about. For me, it's Afro-minimalism, a minimalist life influenced by the African diaspora, but your journey may look very different, and that is okay. And it probably should, right? We're all different.
All very different.
Yeah. And so, I think we're good, right? I'm trying to be respectful of people's time.
Time too. So I want to thank all of you guys for joining my friend and her best-selling book. We're going to speak that into existence because it deserves and she deserves.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time and spending this rainy, I don't know where you are in this country, but it's rainy here in the Northeast and in D.C. And so thank you for hanging with us this Thursday night. Buy the book. If you don't have the book yet, buy the book.
And hopefully when we do some, when it's time to be in person again, I would love to come join y'all in Philly and have another conversation.
I haven't been to Philly in a while. All right, it was a couple weeks ago, but it's been a while.
I will come see y'all at Uncle Bobbie's and visit Chanae, since she acts like I never visit her, and visit Candace. Right, visit my Philly folks. This was wonderful. Again, thank you, Uncle Bobbie's, and thank you for everyone who attended tonight, and I look forward to continuing our conversation in the future.
We appreciate y'all.
Yes. Thank you. So excited. I was following along with everything, and I'm like, 6 hours?
I know. Isn't that wild? And to think that it used to stay in our community for almost an entire year, like 6 hours is just like how are we building generational wealth? How are we investing in our community? Like it's so.
It's mind blowing.
Oh my gosh, right? There's no other word for it. Yeah.
It definitely is. Well, I thank both of you for taking the time out to be here with us tonight. I want to thank everybody in the comments for keeping everything active. And especially those people who ask those questions. I appreciate y'all too. But if you want to get the book, you can use the module at the bottom of the screen, or you can stop by Uncle Bobbie's.
Yay.
I'll be there. And we'll be able to make sure that we get you your book. So thank you guys again, and I hope y'all enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. See ya. All right, how do we? Here we go.